What's up guys, Seth here, back with another video on Marvel Contest of Champions, and today we're going to be hopping into the Apex Coliseum. So we're clearly a bit late to the party here. The Apex Coliseum has been out for quite some time now. We're approaching the last 2 weeks of the event, when the last boss, Ebony Maw, is going to be released tomorrow, but I only just started making videos again, so I haven't had a chance yet to go through the last 3 fights, and so I'm going to do that. And today we're going to start off with Prowler. Now, for people who haven't done the Apex Coliseum yet, the rewards are great. So it is 100% worth you doing, even if it's time consuming, even if it takes you a lot of rounds to get through each fight. Do the Apex Coliseum. You're going to get a bunch of rewards for crystal-based stuff. You're going to get 7-star crystals. You're going to get Titan shards. You're going to get the piece you need for Stellar Forged Blade. You're also going to get a 3 to 4 gem crystal if you are Valiant or above, and then you're also going to get a bunch of tier 5 alpha to get towards another rank 5. If you're Valiant, you're going to get a full one on this milestone, and you're also going to get another half of one on the milestone below too. That is obviously alongside a bunch of the resources that you need to get champions from rank 1 to rank 3 as well. So it would be a significant jump up in rewards for any account, Valiant, Elder, anyone below. It is 100% worth doing, so even if you think it's too time consuming, just get on with it, because it is not often that you see this degree of rewards in the game for free. And this is an entirely free to play event. You can go in there as long as you've got the champions that you can do it with, then everything is at your fingertips. So Prowler, how does the fight work? On Prowler, you've got the typical Coliseum node, which is when it has the rolling health bars. So when you defeat 1 health bar, you get 1 point. And the goal is to get a total per fight of 80 health bars completed. So you can see my best run on Prowler is with a Gamora, and I got 21 health bars with Gamora. What that means is that I've then scored 21 out of my 80 points needed for that fight, and I just had to go in and clear up the remaining 59. The other nodes for Prowler make it a little bit of a trickier fight though, and it makes it a little bit specific with the sort of champions that you want to bring in. So the Buster Groove number 2 node. Basically what this does is it places a timer on Prowler, and he will alternate every 15 seconds between evading your basic attacks and missing your special attacks. So from the start of the fight, for the first 15 seconds of the fight, he will evade all of your basic attacks unless you have some way to prevent evade. Then, after the 15 seconds is up, he will alternate to a different buff, and that will prevent all of your special attacks from hitting the opponent unless, again, you've got some way to prevent that. So the goal of this fight is sort of to have an option that will counter not only miss, but also evade, because then it basically shuts down the entire node. It also will then shut down Prowler's built-in abilities into his own kit, where he gains a miss ability, and that basically triggers when he throws a special attack if you try to punish a special attack, and also if he hits you with medium attack, you're going to gain a falter on the second medium. So without having a champion that specifically counters this fight, you're going to gain a node to help you, but it can also make it a bit trickier, and that is the Giving Chase buff. So Giving Chase buff basically is a rotating system similar to what the Buster Groove node is, but it's in your favor. When you parry Prowler, you will gain a buff. You'll start off with a Pursuit buff, which prevents your attacks from being evaded, and the next time you perform a parry, you're going to instead gain a Vigilance buff, and that is what prevents your attacks from missing. Without a specific counter, the idea of the Prowler fight is that when he gains the Buster Groove node for evading your basics, you would parry, and then you can hit him, because then he's not going to evade those hits. And then, as you build up to a special attack, or as he then rotates to the miss special attack section, your goal is to parry him to gain a Vigilance buff, so that then your special attacks won't miss. Apart from that, the Arduous Coliseum node, which is the same on all Coliseums, but in this instance, it is basically after 5 bars, he will gain a timer, which will exponentially get faster and faster depending on how many bars you've cleared. So the timer will be reducing a lot faster at 10 bars than it is at 5 bars, and a lot faster at 20 bars than it is at 10 bars. And what that timer does is basically, if that runs out and you haven't struck the defender with a heavy attack, he's going to gain a sleep passive on him. And then if you contact him in any way, in a blocked hit or a basic hit or whatever, everything except for a relic and a special attack, you're going to get put to sleep. And that's going to give the opponent the chance to hit you. Now, it's only a very short debuff, the sleep that gets applied to you. You're not unable to attack for very long, But once you're ramped up to that degree, once you're at, past 5 bars, you're into the 10s, 15s, maybe even 20s, the damage of the defender is very, very high. So even having a second of an opening, Prowler having the ability to put one combo against you, you're pretty much guaranteed to die. Especially with Prowler's Rupture attacks, once you gain a combo and you might potentially gain a couple of Ruptures, you're dead. So you need to avoid that, you need to play around that, and that's where finding the right option to be able to constantly cycle heavy attacks is really, really key for this fight, as it is in all of the Apex Coliseum fights. The nodes are very standard, just health, attack. He's more likely to activate the special too, which you sort of want to avoid with Prowler because it is very easy to catch you up. But outside of that, the nodes are very, very standard Coliseum nodes. I think it's good to learn this node with a bit of an inopportune matchup because it is a node you see in other places, but it's also going to make the fights a lot easier when you're using your opportune matchups, because then you're also going to know exactly how the nodes work regardless of who you're using. And if you slip up or if they fall out of this opportune stage in the fight, then you know how to get back to that without being punished. So as we're going in, I'm going to parry, and you'll see from that first parry, I gain the pursuit charge. What that basically means is now, even though Prowler has that evade charge, the evade is going to fail. Then, when the next time I parry, I'm going to instead gain a vigilance buff. That is then going to prevent my specials from missing. If I was to throw a special 1 or a special 2, it would connect with Prowler. So in an inopportune matchup, you're kind of trying to balance around that. You can also, to be able to shuffle to what you need, you can parry the last hit of Prowler's special 1 and then punish him as well to be able to make contact. But you can see if you get the wrong combination of buffs to whatever buff Prowler has on his kit, it's very difficult to then get a decent amount of hits in without an appropriate counter. And that's basically all of the nodes. Now it's just finding the right combination of abilities of your own champion in interaction with the nodes to then try to find an option for clearing a decent amount of health bars. All right, so you can see with Hyperion, we have now cleared out nearly 5 bars, now 5 bars with the special 3. And this, I think, speaks to more so how good Hyperion is compared to him being an actually good counter. But you can see with just playing around the nodes, it is reasonable to get a decent amount of bars down, even with an inopportune matchup. So in this matchup, who are the good options? Clearly, Gamora is a good option based on the score that I got against Prowler, but who else? Because not everyone's gonna have a Gamora. So let's go over who some options are to clear a decent amount of bars. Now, online, you will see a lot of runs of 20 bars cleared, 25 bars cleared, 30 bars cleared. If you're MSD, even more than that. But for the average person, who are the champions that are going to get you 5 to 10 bars, get the job done, and get out without using a ton of energy to be able to clear each Coliseum boss, considering there's 4 separate Coliseum bosses that you need to complete in order to get all of the rewards. The first champion that I'm going to be looking at is Medusa. Medusa covers half of what the issue in the nodes are. Under her signature ability, whenever she inflicts an armor shattered or gains a fervor buff, she also gains a true accuracy buff. What the true accuracy buff does is it's going to prevent the opponent from evading. So it sort of covers the entire part of the node that evades basic attacks. It pretty much means that you can ignore that section entirely and you can focus purely on maintaining your vigilance buff to be able to then maintain your miss counter on the node as well. Now, Medusa obviously isn't the perfect counter. She's not going to cover the miss ability without still relying on the node, but she at least covers half of the issue. I would say if you were to choose an option between a champion that counters miss and a champion that counters evade, I think a champion that counters miss is going to be much more beneficial on this fight, purely because you're not only dealing with the special miss node, but you're also dealing with Prowler's kit as well. So in Prowler's kit, it's built in that he will miss an attack if you try to punish one of his special attacks. You are trying to be quite aggressive in the fight. Once you have that armor shatter up, you're sort of racing to a special 3 to try to maintain that armor shatter and to try to get another armor shatter on top of the defender to maintain that high damage. Obviously, when it falls off, you can replace that armor shatter through the special 1, but Medusa loves to have that armor shatter maintained the entire time. So whilst it might not be ideal, I think Medusa is a champion that a lot of people have ranked up for reasons outside of Coliseum, even if it's a 6-star version or a low rank 7-star version. I think a lot of people enjoy Medusa's play and they know that there's a lot of value in Medusa as a champion even outside of this sort of content. And so I think a lot of people could avoid making Coliseum specific rank ups because she's a great champion outside of this game mode too. Whereas there definitely are champions that are excellent to use in Coliseum, but aren't that great outside of it. They're the ones that create the difficult specific counters because the amount of resources that you may have to dump into these very specific niche counters might counteract a lot of the resources and rewards that you're getting from the Coliseum in the first place. Now, the next champion that I'm going to go over has been quite popular recently with the current Roll Coliseum event as well, and that is Knull. So Knull is on a similar strand to Medusa, in which he covers half of the node, and it is the same half of the node that Medusa covers, which is the evade. So built into Knull's kit, symbiote attacks gain a passive true accuracy, and true accuracy ignores auto block and evade effects. What that means is that on Knull's medium attacks, his heavy attacks, and his special 1 attacks, he cannot be evaded. That covers half of it because a lot of Knull's ramp as well, you are going to be using his medium attacks and his heavy attacks, but again, you're having to play around the miss. It's a bit easier to play around the miss because Knull has a fair few more mechanics that make him a bit more protected. Once you're ramped up with Knull and you're cycling through your corruption stages, and you're maintaining that with your special ones, you're going to be regularly gaining unstoppable buffs. In a fight with Knull, you're going to find that if you accidentally miss, if you accidentally don't gain a vigilance buff in time, that unstoppable does save you a fair bit. Just because when you're regularly maintaining that corruption, you're also regularly gaining those unstoppables. And so there is a nice protection layer with Knull. I guess in a similar way, Medusa has her auto block, but it's just not as regular as what Knull's unstoppable ability is. Now I will say, unlike Medusa, Knull has a much higher ceiling with the amount of damage he can put out in this fight. Knull is one of the biggest ramp characters in the game, and so when he is ramped and when he does have a large amount of armor breaks on the defender and you are in the corruption stage, he's going to be dealing a ridiculous amount of damage in that stage. When you're there, great, you're going to be melting bars like nothing. But when you're in that stage and it is starting to slow down a little bit because of the amount of special attacks you're having to bait out and the amount of playing around of the miss you're going to have to do, it's very hard to maintain the corruption to the degree that it is in the Roll Coliseum. So in the Roll Coliseum, it's such a fight against Jack-o'-lantern that you're able to just constantly cycle heavy attacks, you're able to constantly cycle and not worry about your missing ability, and you're able to just spam special ones into the opponent and maintain that corruption the whole time, constantly cycling between your living abyss and your armor breaks. In this fight, however, because you're having to be a bit more specific with what you're doing, you're having to parry at the right times, you're having to dodge at the right times to be able to gain that vigilance buff to avoid missing in your special attacks, it slows everything down a little bit. And you'll find that your corruptions are falling off a lot more than they would be in other fights, purely because you don't have time to get to your special one, or you have your special one, but you haven't had an opportunity to properly parry him yet to be able to get that vigilance buff to avoid the miss. Knull has a really high ceiling. If you're a really skilled Knull player, you will be able to get a lot of bars off on this fight, but the skill ceiling is a little bit higher for that amount. Now in this fight, I was able to get off a decent amount of bars just in testing him. And you can see once you're in the corruption stage, your hits are ridiculous. Like your damage output is great, but you're just gonna find that it's very, very hard to maintain it. I mean, you can see since starting corruption, we've churned through a few bars. The degeneration just keeps ticking through as well. But you can see because of the special one not being able to throw it whenever you need to and whenever you want to be able to maintain that ramp, it gets very, very difficult to maintain Knull's damage to the highest level as well. Regardless, excellent option to chip away some bars, a bit of a higher skill cap, but if you can meet that skill cap, very, very, very rewarding option. Now, the last option that I'm going to be going over that I think everyone should be using, Gamora is the best option. I think Gamora is the safest option. I think that once you get used to Gamora's abilities and Gamora's playstyle, this fight becomes pretty straightforward. As I said, with Medusa and with Knull, they both covered one side of the node. Gamora, however, once ramped, covers both. So, as you can see under the always active abilities, if Gamora has 8 or more personal buffs active, her attacks cannot miss. Gamora basically will regularly gain cruelty buffs and fury buffs. And you build these up throughout the fight and you refresh these buffs with a heavy attack. Very, very convenient for Coliseum, being the requirement of once you're past 5 bars or more, you're going to be throwing a lot of heavy attacks. And when you can counter both miss and evade, you can very, very easily heavy counter Prowler Special 1, which he will be throwing constantly. So once you are ramped, it is a very, very straightforward fight to be able to maintain that ramp. And then the last piece of that puzzle, with the Special 3, it grants you a 100% chance to gain a True Strike buff for 14 seconds, which allows Gamora to ignore armor, resistances, auto block, and all evade. So with Gamora, the fight starts the same as with other champions. You're playing around the node, you're parrying at the right times to be able to gain either your ability to avoid evade or to avoid miss, until the point where you get to your Special 3 attack. By the time you get to your Special 3, you're pretty likely to have the buffs that you need to also prevent the miss ability. If you get the option to be able to heavy attack at the right times, obviously because of his non-contact attacks, it makes parrying a little bit difficult because often you can only parry on his light attack, so you're sort of having to re-parry each time. So before he starts throwing regular special attack, it can be a bit difficult to get in a proper parry heavy attack. Once you can, you're going to maintain all of those buffs. And then after the Special 3, all you're trying to do is get to the amount of buffs that you need to be able to avoid miss if you haven't already, and then Prowler's abilities are basically shut down. You can then go into this cycle of using your heavy attack to punish each of his special attacks. And in the later bars, because of the amount of combat power rate that Prowler has, he's going to be getting a Special 1 almost every heavy attack you throw. He's going to be very, very, very regularly throwing Special 1s at you. You can avoid that last hit, you can punish him with the heavy attack, you can then cycle in your relic and your special attacks to get even more damage in. And you can do some really nice combos with Gamora because of just her ability to ignore all of the difficult parts of these nodes. Gamora, I think, is one of those champions that you pretty much can endlessly cycle as long as the AI cooperates. There gets to a point in pretty much every fight that I do with Gamora where Prowler a little reluctant to throw the Special 1, probably due to the node that makes him more likely to throw the Special 2, but he gets to a point where he just shuts down, and no matter how many times you try and bait it out, he just won't throw it, and eventually you get put to sleep. But Gamora is a counter where you are potentially doing 20 plus bars on Prowler before you get put to sleep. So if you get good with Gamora, and it might take you a couple of fights, you know, if you haven't done these fights yet, likely the first time you're trying it, you're going to get 0 bars. The second time, you might get 1 or 2. The third time, you might get 3 or 4. But if you keep practicing at it, I think that most people who've been playing this game for a while and are familiar with the game and take in the information that they're being presented with the nodes and with the champion abilities, I think most people will be able to cycle a decent amount of bars with ideal matchups like Gamora. Now, I also did record the full 21 bar fight with Gamora as well. If you want to see that, I'll put the link to that video in the description too. But the premise is the same. You're doing the same thing of baiting the Special 1 and countering with a heavy attack. It's very, very standard once you're used to it, but it's going to make the Prowler fight much, much, much more manageable using a champion that counters not only the evade, but also the miss. So guys, that's going to do it. That is Prowler wrapped up. Now, if you've gotten through this video and you found that you don't have any of the options really for this fight, you don't really have a high ranked Gamora or Medusa or Knull or any of the other champions that are listed in the world list, maybe you don't have any of them ranked up, it can still be done with low ranked champions. You're just going to spend a lot more energy to do it, but it can still be done and it is still worth doing. But I hope that the information they went over in this video is going to at least let you go into that fight a bit more informed so that you maybe don't spend as much energy in clearing it out as you otherwise would have. Now, over the next week, I'm actually going to be on holidays, but I'm going to record the videos for Dazzler, Airwalker, and Ebony Maw in advance so that I can then release those and you can go through those fights as well if you haven't yet. Because as I said, you are going to have to do all of the fights up to the full 80 bars if you want to claim all of the rewards. But with the tips that I'm going to bring up and the champions that I'm going to recommend, it makes the fights very, very manageable. And you can see across the board, I've hit close to 15 on pretty much all of them, if not over 20. And I'm hoping to do a similar thing with Ebony Maw as well, as tomorrow we'll find out what that fight fully entails too. And once I do find out what it entails, I'll share it all with you as well. But in the meantime, I hope that's been helpful, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Leave a comment if you found a counter that I didn't go over, and let me know if you decided to use the counters that I recommended and how you went with those as well. If you have any questions about it, leave it in the comments below too. I'll be happy to answer any questions about champions or counters or specific matchups that you want to go over in the Coliseum and things that I might recommend, or maybe things you can recommend that I didn't think of as well. That'd be great to hear too. Until the next one, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.